These choux pastries meet all my criteria for the perfect dessert. A contrasting flavor, slightly bitter from the cocoa cream and sweet from the praline. A contrasting texture, the cocoa cream is incredibly smooth, while the praline is slightly crunchy. And the outer shell of the choux is also crunchy, making them just perfect. Hi, I'm Robert and today we're making cocoa and praline choux pastries. From this recipe, you'll get exactly 12 choux, or maybe more or fewer, depending on the size you make them. Let's get started with the pâte à choux, the choux pastry dough. We're making a cocoa pâte à choux to give the choux a more attractive final look. In a saucepan, I've added 100 grams of water, 100 grams of milk, 100 grams of butter, 10 grams of sugar and a pinch of salt, bringing them to a boil. It is important that the liquid doesn't start boiling before the butter has melted, so start heating it on low heat until the butter melts, then you can increase the temperature. Once it reaches a boil, remove the saucepan from the heat and add 123 grams of flour and 10 grams of cocoa, which I've already mixed together. I'm making a cocoa pâte à choux, but if you prefer a classic pâte à choux, simply omit the cocoa and use 133 grams of flour instead. This is just my choice to make the cocoa pâte à choux. Now, mix everything well until fully combined. Return the saucepan to the heat and stir continuously, making sure the spatula doesn't touch the bottom of the pan. A thin film will form on the bottom, which we don't want to incorporate into the dough as it would cause cracks in the baked choux. So keep stirring until the film fully forms on the bottom. Transfer the dough to a stand mixer bowl or a regular mixing bowl if you prefer to mix by hand. Here's that film I mentioned. Mix on low speed with the paddle attachment until the dough cools to around 40 degrees Celsius, basically until it's warm but no longer too hot to the touch. Once the dough has cooled, add about 200 grams of well-beaten eggs. The exact amount of egg may vary, depending on the water content in the eggs, room humidity, and how much moisture evaporated while cooking the dough. You might need slightly more or slightly less egg, but I'll show you the texture we're aiming for. Add the eggs gradually, one at a time. The correct texture should be like this. When you lift the paddle, the dough forms a V shape or a small hanging beard. It should not be too runny, dripping straight off the paddle, but also shouldn't break off immediately. If it breaks too fast, you need to add more egg. If it flows too much, you've added too much egg, and unfortunately the only solution is to make another batch with less egg and mix the two together. Now transfer the pâte à choux to another bowl, cover it with plastic wrap in direct contact, and let it rest for about 2 hours before using it. While the dough is resting, let's make the craquelin, the crunchy topping for the choux. In the stand mixer bowl, I've added 60 grams of butter, 80 grams of sugar. Mix them just until combined. We don't want to aerate it, just blend them smoothly. Once combined, add 75 grams of flour and 5 grams of cocoa, since we're making a cocoa craquelin. If you want a plain craquelin, skip the cocoa and use 80 grams of flour instead. You can also add gel food coloring to customize the color. Mix again, starting at low speed. The dough should look like this. Roll it out between two sheets of parchment paper to a very thin layer, maximum 2-3 mm thick. Be careful not to form wrinkles, as those spots will crack when cutting the craquelin. Once evenly rolled out, place it in the fridge to form up before cutting. While both the choux dough and the craquelin are chilling, we can start on the praline. I love using a mix of hazelnuts and almonds, 100 grams of each. I roasted them in the oven at 150 Celsius for about 10 minutes. Meanwhile, in a saucepan, I'm melting 200 grams of sugar. The craquelin has now firmed up in the fridge, so let's cut it. For the choux I'm making, I use 5.5 cm circles. The idea is for the craquelin to be about 1 cm larger than the base of the choux. My choux are 4.5 cm at the base, so the craquelin is 5.5 cm. Before cutting, peel off the parchment paper from both sides to make it easier to remove the circles, then simply cut them out. Once cut, don't try to lift them right away as they are soft. Instead, place them in the freezer to firm, making them easier to handle. Now the pâte à choux has cooled and is transferred to a piping bag with a round tip. I'm using a micro-perforated silicone mat so that the air trapped under the shoe can escape, ensuring a perfectly even base. If you pipe onto a parchment paper, they might not come out as perfectly shaped. This mat has eclair guides, but the same type exists with round guides for shoe, helping maintain consistent size. I'll try to pipe them as evenly as possible, aiming for a 4.5 cm base. On top of each shoe, I'm placing a frozen craquelin disc. Some aren't perfectly round, but that's okay. Once baked, they will soften and evenly coat the shoe. Bake at 165 Celsius with fan for about 45 minutes. Do not open the oven early. Once baked, work quickly to poke a hole in each shoe to allow steam to escape. This prevents condensation inside, which could make them soggy. While the shoe bake, let's make the filling. In a bowl, I combined 144 grams of sugar, 24 grams of cornstarch, and 24 grams of cocoa, mixing them with a whisk. Gradually add 360 grams of warm milk while stirring to form a thick paste. This method prevents cocoa lumps from forming. Once the paste is smooth, add 6 egg yolks and mix well. Return everything to a saucepan and cook over a medium-high heat, stirring constantly until it thickens and becomes glossy. Finally, mix in 180 grams of butter until fully incorporated. The choux are almost done baking, so let's finish the praline. In a food processor, blend the roasted almonds and hazelnuts with the caramelized sugar until it reaches a paste-like consistency. You can make it as smooth or as crunchy as you prefer. I like it a bit crunchy. Once the choux have cooled, it's time to fill them. Using a small star piping tip, cut a tiny hole in the top and remove excess dough from the inside using a toothpick. This allows for more filling and ensures a neat cross-section when cut. Pipe the cocoa cream into each choux, filling about 80%. Then, inject praline using another piping bag and top with a bit more cocoa cream. For decoration, I'm keeping it simple with some crushed almonds, but you can pipe a swirl or cream or add a chocolate garnish. Here's how the choux turned out. My tip is to bake, fill and serve them on the same day for best texture and flavor. For more recipes like this, don't forget to like, subscribe and follow me on Instagram for more useful tips.